how do we train the next generation of creatives, right?
You have to be a more interesting person. If you are a more interesting person, you get better ideas what to put in your camera. You get in trouble. You travel more, you learn more about the world, you talk to people. You want to be, in general, like a better designer. I wouldn't say even a better entrepreneur. Like whatever you want to do, be more interesting. Go places, get uncomfortable. Then you pour some of that in your work. Okay, and I bet it's gonna be way better.
But do you worry that we're headed towards like this cliff of like one-click creativity? Is that a problem for the industry?
Uh, Maybe. Okay. Let's just start. Like, I don't have any crystal ball here. Okay. I think when something becomes super easy to do, people get tired of it. It stops clicking, you know? So if you get like
Yeah.
a one button marketing campaign, oh man, I'm pretty sure that very soon you're gonna get. It's like people hitting you on the email nowadays with a super custom message that is like, okay,
Yeah.
I see the template here, and I see discard. Nobody's reading this. Discard, discard,
Exactly.
discard. I think it's gonna be a little bit
Exactly.
of that, right? Like there's gonna be, like, I'm pretty sure there are gonna be many products that will do that, that will launch campaigns and all of that. I think they are gonna be boring as hell.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Maginative Podcast. I'm super excited to be joined by the CEO of Freepik, Joaquin Cuenca Abela. I have been using Freepik for years. Freepik is known for providing so many assets to the community, but it has evolved, especially in the age of AI. So I'm excited to be sitting down with Joaquin to talk about not just the intersection of AI and the creative industry, but how adtech, martech is changing completely with the AI age. And also about Freepik as a corporation. How are they thinking about becoming an AI first company? How are they thinking about culture? How are they thinking about AI adoption? So grab a seat, grab something to drink, and stay tuned for an amazing conversation. Joaquin, thank you for sitting down with me. How are you doing?
Hi, Chris. Excited to be here and excited to be talking with you. Start hitting me. Like, I want to hear those questions.
Excellent. Well, let's start with Upscale Conf. Next week is Upscale Conf. What can users expect? Why should we be excited to tune in?
First of all, we got an amazing lineup of speakers. Okay, so it's a conference that is pretty unique because we try to get people that are very high, index very high on technology, on especially AI technologies,
Mhm.
of course, and on the creativity side. So you also get the users, the creatives that are all day long using those technologies, and we put them together so that they can give each other feedback. You can understand what the creative minds of this world need the most. And you can also understand what is possible today, what are the new things that became possible very recently. So it's a very unique opportunity.
Awesome. I'm definitely going to tune in. So, as I mentioned in the intro, Joaquin, I've been using Freepik for years, and I've seen the platform evolve. Initially, when I thought of Freepik, I used to think of just somewhere you'd go to get creative assets. Talk to us about how Freepik has evolved today. Talk about the offerings that you have and how you have embraced AI. Because now, when we think of some of the cutting edge creative AI tools, they're coming in from Freepik. So, how did you make that transition? And how should people be thinking about Freepik today?
Okay, maybe let me start a little bit about how we started the company and why. Okay, we were making websites. That was at the end of 2010, and the bottleneck for us was to find great images. And we were
Mm.
pretty cheapo. Okay, we wanted to save a buck, and what we did is find around 10 different websites that had free images, and we built a search engine that searched on those websites. Okay, and it was a way to save us some time because initially we're doing it manually. We're coming to those websites one by one, searching for what we wanted. You can imagine how painful it was, okay, when you search for something
Yeah.
like this. So the first product, it was a search engine, very bare bones, but it became an overnight success. Immediately, it got traffic, got plenty of people interested, and it started growing and growing. And what we did is we look at what the users were doing on the website, get what kind of images they were downloading, where were the main pain points, and we address them. Okay, so we add more diversity to the images. Eventually, we changed. We decided that external images were not good enough, and we started creating ourselves the images. We built a marketplace.
Mhm.
We iterated, and we iterated. Okay, and that was we had a pretty well established motion. until 2022, I think it was when DALI 2 came out. Okay. Honestly, I said that multiple times. Like I was completely blown away. Like I was aware of the Gen AI techniques like GANs and the early diffusion models. I was not
Yeah.
expecting anything like this anytime soon. Okay? I was really like, so
Yeah.
yeah, at that point, me and my team, we decided that we had two options here. Either we, you know, either we go all in on AI or we do a little bit of AI because maybe it was not yet working well enough. It had the glitches.
Hmm.
It was not perfect. We decided to
Yeah.
go all in, and the decision it was on if we make too much AI, we are gonna make mistakes, but that's gonna be okay. We are gonna land in a decent position. If we do too little AI and we make the mistake of doing too little, we are gonna be in a far worse position. Okay, so we decided to
Uh,
do almost strategically to do too much. Okay, and I will argue that we did too much AI. Okay, so we had to back some of the initiatives that we had initially because the state of
really?
yeah.
Can you explain that a little bit for me?
Oh,
How did you do too much AI?
like one of them, it was we accepted any kind of Gen AI images on our stock library. Okay, that was one of the very
Mm,
early steps. He sent a message. Okay, the message was Freepik is friendly to AI. Okay, we want to understand the technology. It's okay to use it. It's a valid method of creation. But initial images were garbage. Okay, especially compared to the images that we had on our library. So people that came to Freepik to find images that have been curated, tested, high quality, all of a sudden they got a worse experience. Okay, and we had to back
yeah.
from that. We had to clean up again the library. We had to take out a lot of low quality images. I think it's okay. Okay, like it's one of those things where
Yeah.
we did too much, and we just fix it.
Now, talking about that, because how do you think of creativity? How do you define creativity in an era where AI can now generate images, as you're saying, video? How do you think about creativity?
I don't think there is a good definition of creativity. Okay, it gets used for many different things. Nobody has a clear definition. For some people, what the AI is doing is creativity. For some other people, it's not creativity. Let me put it this other way. Okay, I think there is another mental model here. Is there are some tasks
Hmm.
for which you can iterate. Okay, you have a clear goal, clear measurable goal. You can start little by little. You can see if it's working or not, and you can iterate towards your goal. Okay. For example, you have that on online performance marketing. It's something where you can start small,
Hmm.
you can show an ad to a few people, see how they react, change the ad, and kind of iterate on that process. I think those tasks eventually they will be done, all of it, the whole stack by the AI. You're gonna give them the end goal, they're gonna iterate towards that goal. Okay. But
Okay.
there are some other use cases where you don't have the luxury of iteration, either because you don't have a clear, measurable goal, or because it's just not possible to iterate. Imagine if you're making a film, you have one shot. Okay, you put the film in the theaters, and this is it. You cannot you cannot meaningfully iterate on the film. Okay, or you put a video game, there are going to be things that you can iterate on video games, and there are some other things that you cannot iterate. You do traditional marketing, physical, where you get billboards in places, you cannot iterate. Sometimes you have one shot, and then you need that human intuition to maximize your chances of success. Okay, I will argue that you need somebody that is living in the world, having an opinion, okay, and having this feeling of what is going to work today with your audience, because they understand your
Mm,
audience and they understand what makes them click. Okay, I think that's pretty unique to humans today because AI is kind of living on the internet, so it's getting plenty of signals, but it's not really like living with us. So it lacks some signal, it lacks
mm.
information to make that gut feeling decision of this is what I want on my film. This is the artistic direction that I'm taking. Okay, because it's also sometimes because I want to say something, and people react to that. So there was, maybe I'm making this a little bit too long again, and feel free to cut me because it can get
No,
it,
keep going, please.
so there was a study where they put an AI to answer questions from elder people. Okay, so they were calling the system, say, "I'm feeling bad. I'm feeling bad about this and that," and the AI was, I say, "Listen, I completely understand. I went through that myself. I mean, this is how you can make it better." And they were ranking the answers, and AI was through the roof, like especially, very surprisingly, on emotional connection. It was much better than other humans. But the second this person learned that the answer came from an AI, just they downgraded it like hell. It's like, what the fuck? You told me that you understood me. You told me that you went through that. It was all completely fake. Yeah. I will argue that
Yeah.
sometimes, we want to understand that somebody is having something real behind the screen. They are sending a real message. Okay. So I like to divide those two use cases. You can iterate, you get about the end
Yeah.
goal, or you cannot iterate. You have a message to send. You have one shot. Okay. If you have one shot, I AI still has a role. Okay, because it can help you deliver your message faster, better, in a more impactful way. Okay. But the UI that you need is completely different. What you need is controllability. What you need is being able to steer the output of the AI. What you want is a magic device that takes what is in your brain and just makes it real. Okay. And that's one product.
Mhm.
That's what we are working on. Okay. And you have some other product perfectly valid that's different from what we do, which is, okay, this is my brand, this is my positioning, this is my budget. My goal is optimize ROI or whatever. Those are my channels. Okay, go wild. Okay, and I think I will argue this is a different product. Okay, creativity to
I
me
see.
is we work with creative people because they have one shot, they have one message to send, and it's about the quality of the message. Is about saying something that is important to other people and that can resonate with other people. And I think you need somebody that has gone through sometimes through hell, to send a good message and to make it really
Oh,
resonate. So that's why we work
oh,
with creatives, and there are going to be other products that maybe also work with creatives but are taking more of the creative workload than themselves.
oh. All right. So you obviously at Freepik, you serve millions of users across the internet. How are you seeing their behaviors change with the introduction of AI into your product?
It's an excellent question. Like, number one thing, there is an obvious evolution in customer support tickets. So it's fascinating to read them. It takes a long time, but it's very useful. You see how when you introduce any new AI feature, initially people are mind blown. Say, how is this even possible? Well, sometimes the early feedback was just, what the hell? Like, just, what is this? Okay. And then after 1 month, you start getting the tickets. It's like, I asked it to do a green umbrella, and it's no, it's doing the green tree, but not the green umbrella. How comes? Because I said green umbrella. And I asked to put this thing to the right, and it's making it on the left. It's like, dude, it's almost understanding what you, you know, the the quality bar just starts going up. Like, and
Yeah,
it's a bit
yeah.
depressing because just people start believing it. They take it for granted very quickly. And then they start going to the next level and the next one and the next one. It's pretty amazing how the expectations just keep climbing. That's the biggest change. The other one is we manage 60% of our traditional user base. And I mean, traditional is the people that had subscribed on Freepik to download existing assets. 60% of them have moved to create assets with GenAI. I think it's a pretty phenomenal transformation. Okay. And
Yeah. Well,
what we see is that for many of them, AI on one shot, they get 60, 70% of what they want. Okay. And that's phenomenal. And the other 30% is a world of pain. And that's still state of the art, sadly. Okay. So if you're
Yeah,
an
yeah.
artist, try it. If it doesn't work, you're not alone. There are more people like you. But it's very interesting to understand what is the little 70%, what are the use cases where AI can actually do 80, 90% already, or even 100%. And they can take completely this pain out of your hands, out of your shoulders, and make it much better. And understand what are the things that are not yet there and that you still need to work yourself on. Okay. And keep an eye, on progress. And it's I think it's like keeping up with the state of the art is difficult because it's a very dynamic field, but it's very, very rewarding. And you really need to that today in your career.
So then let's talk about some of the models, right? We've seen the models evolve so quickly. The state of the art, as you mentioned, the bar keeps going higher and higher. What are some of your favorite models today? What technologies have you seen that you're like, man, I didn't think would be here in 2025?
Oh, one that blew me away was VO2. Google VO2. VO2,
Yeah.
it is amazing. Kling is another of my favorites. Kling is really
Hmm.
top notch. Recently, I really loved what I don't know how you say it in English, Higgs field or Higgs. I think it's Higgs field.
Higgsfield,
Higgs
yes.
field.
Yes.
Phenomenal work, like really clever understanding of okay, maybe image generation as a whole is it's too big of a task, and I can solve camera movement, visual effects, explosions. So you pick up a niche and then it becomes 10 times easier. And I'm not claiming it's easier. They did a phenomenal job on that one. Image
Yeah.
generation, I really like our Mystic models.
Hmm.
And if I can pick an external one, I will pick Midjourney. It's a classic, but I think
Wow.
they are not good for all use cases because I mentioned before how important it is for somebody who has a message to have control, to have steerability, and Midjourney doesn't give you that, but they give you inspiration, which is, another
Hmm.
thing on Midjourney come out beautiful. I think in some cases, the images, many cases actually, the images on Mystic, they are on par with Midjourney, and I really hope eventually will be better across all dimensions. They are a competitor, but I have to tip my hat to them.
Awesome. I love that. I have a couple of the questions around safety and security. What guardrails are you putting in place for your models to, and even any additional tools that you're using to ensure things like copyright infringement isn't something that creatives have to worry about? How do you think about the ethics behind how models are trained and tuned? A lot of creatives are anti tools because they're saying, hey, it's taken away the work of other creatives. What are your thoughts on that?
It's a very complex subject. I'm not ethically against it. Okay, let's start by that. And I'm gonna explain why. Let's let's forget for a second about image generation models. Let's go to text generation models. Okay, LLMs, basic LLMs. If you think about it, LLMs, things like ChatGPT, they have been trained with the whole of the internet and then some. Okay, it's they took all of the internet and then some private data sets, everything they could get their hands on. Okay, everything. If you don't do that, you don't get an LLM that works. It is essential to use absolutely everything.
Yeah.
Okay. So, from a practical standpoint, if you if your law in each country, the country where you are, the law in your country forbids the usage of a piece of data when you don't own the copyright, then you, as a consequence, you cannot have an LLM because you cannot obtain copyright on the whole of the internet. You can have some smaller data sets.
Yeah.
You can go to the New York Times and you can get, a license to use the New York Times. So there's a middle ground that became actually the law in Europe is you can use anything where the author has not opt out. And that's okay, because that still gives you the option to use all the classic works that are on the internet and all the data where frankly, honestly. Like the people that created it don't care. They are okay if it's getting
Hmm.
used. But the big
Yeah.
pieces of data that have some copyright where the author cares about it, they can opt out. Okay, and then you need to license it. Okay. So I think that's a trade-off that can work. If you come from a position where people creating models need to license all the data, then you need to understand that you are sacrificing LLMs. And when you sacrifice LLM, what you sacrifice for society is the promise that we will get cheap intelligence in a way, where you will get free intelligence. You sacrifice the, and we are very close to that, the option to do medical research at top speed, the option for everybody in society to get a top-notch doctor, no matter what you have. You sacrifice the option to get individual tutors for students. You sacrifice that you have to do is absolutely massive. It's all the promise of AI. Okay. And the win is that everybody feels respected under copyright, which is a very valid claim. Okay. And as a politician, when you draft the law, you need to strike a balance. It's always the case that there is a balance. Okay. So in one case, you have the rightful, the rights of those who created the content and how strict you want to be with
Hmm.
that. And the other one is how useful is this going to be to society. Yeah, that's why in copyright, after a certain period of time, copyright expires. It's a compromise. You can profit from that, but not forever. At some point, society can use it.
Hmm.
Okay? If you take that to image, on image, it's slightly different. Okay, the difference is that you can actually license images to train a Gen AI image model. The problem is that all the models that have been trained only with licensed data, they are subpar. They don't work as well as the models that have been trained with the whole of internet. Okay. One option that has been taken by many companies is all of them, all the modern models. They have been trained on all the images that they find on the internet, except for those images where the author has opt out. Okay. So if you use Flux, for example, it's a very popular open source model. They took out of their data set the images from Getty, Shutterstock, ourselves, Freepik, and everybody else who opt out. And I think that's a valid trade-off. And that's
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
that's how it's the law today in Europe. Okay. I'm not that familiar with the US as far as I know. In the US, it is still an open question if it's fair use or not to use those images to train a model. It is a very
Hmm.
difficult question
Yeah.
because in copyright law, it's usually about the final piece of output. Is this output clearly inspired by this other output or not? Okay. And outputs, I will argue, they are not inspired by a individual input. Okay. So if it was done by a human, if the output that you get from any Gen AI model was done by a person, I don't think there will be any argument. It will not be a copyright infringement. Okay. So now we are getting into a position where the method that you use to create the piece of work is what matters and not actually the piece of work. You see how difficult it's becoming. Okay. And
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
um, so me, I'm not ethically opposed to that. I think it's a good trade-off. The trade-off of you can use whatever as long as this person has, I mean, the opt-out option. Uh, the opt-in option, I don't think is viable. Okay, I don't think it's viable because you cannot create good models with that option. It doesn't work.
All right. So I can appreciate that. Finding that middle ground is going to be a topic of ongoing conversation, I think, especially in the US and in many countries. So let's kind of move forward a bit then to the role of the creative professional or the designer. How do you think that evolves in the next 5 years, given the pace of AI innovation and just how capable the models are becoming?
I think it becomes more somebody with an opinion that is grounded on the real world. If all you do is grounded on digital data, I think you're gonna get out of the loop sooner or later. Like AI is pretty good at taking any digital information and transforming this digital information into a new digital information. Okay. What it's not that good at is picking up picking up like real world signals. Because again, it's not living here. Okay. So if you have a customer, the understanding of the customer by how they dress, by what is their business, you can pick plenty of signals just by looking at that. Okay, so a good designer is somebody, I think somebody that is interesting, okay, has an opinion on things, and it kind of can smell what the customer wants, okay, and how to make something that resonates for them and for their customers. I mentioned before that I think that there are some kind of jobs that are going to be disintermediated by AI. Okay, like those jobs that are kind of work in a loop and can iterate. I think we are gonna be, people feel like they have fewer and fewer things to do by themselves, and in some cases they may collapse down to zero. Yeah, but on the other hand, you have
Mm.
the created jobs where you have to have an opinion and to put an opinion on the table. I think they're gonna stay. Okay. Somebody said that now everybody has very high quality cameras, but we don't get more films. It's true. It's very difficult to put a message that actually resonates with plenty of people to have good ideas. This is what is really valuable. And it's way more interesting than the previous job. So it's pretty good that we have that problem.
But do you worry that we're headed towards like this cliff of like one-click creativity? Is that a problem for the industry?
Nah, maybe. Okay. Let's just start like I don't have any crystal ball here, and that can be like it's just an opinion. Okay. I think when something becomes super easy to do, people get tired of it. Okay. I don't know. You go into web design back on the early days. I remember at the very beginning. You could that sounds very archaic, but on a website you could put like a div, and then you can put a border on the div, and it was like completely square, like the borders were completely square, and the fancy thing to do it was to make it a little circle. That was wow, it was super trendy. And then on CSS, they added a property so that you can have a rounded corner because it became so popular. Everybody was doing it with
Yeah.
images, and it was a pain. So they made it easy. And then it fall out of fashion because it was so easy that everybody was doing it. And we jumped into the new thing that was again difficult, and then they added it to CSS and fall out of fashion. I would argue that soon as something becomes so common that everybody's doing it, it stops clicking, you know. So if you get like
Yeah.
a one button marketing campaign, oh man, I'm pretty sure that very soon you're gonna get. It's like people hitting you on the email nowadays with a super custom message that is like, okay,
Yeah.
I see the template here, and I see discard. Nobody's reading it. Discard, discard,
Exactly.
discard. I think it's gonna be a little bit
Exactly.
of that, right? Like there's gonna be, like, I'm pretty sure there are gonna be many products that will do that, that will launch campaigns and all of that. I think they are gonna be boring as hell. And then you have people that really come up
Yeah.
with new ideas. And I think we are gonna value that way more.
I love that. So then let's talk about the future of creativity. How do we train the next generation of creatives, right? Like what skill sets do we need them to solve for, especially if they're leveraging AI? How do
I
we
love that
train them?
question. Okay, I love that question. Listen, I mentioned this multiple times. It's an anecdote that I love to mention. Is I was listening to an interview of a photographer that was like 20 years ago. Okay. And the guy, he was a legend.
Mhm.
Okay. He was an old guy in New York. And the question is, how do you become a better photographer? And the guy, no, to me, is you put your camera in black and white and you become a better photographer. But he went into the details, and he starts saying, like the exposure, the aperture, like the timing, all of that. You learn it at school. So that's easy. You go to school, and in 1 year, 2 years, you're going to master it. You want to be a better photographer, you have to be a more interesting person. I was like, he's right, man. If you are a more interesting person, you get better ideas what to put on your camera. you get in trouble. You are there at the wrong time, at the wrong, it's like you get the image that nobody's getting because you were not supposed to be there, because you are looking
Yeah.
at things, it's like, wow, how do you took that picture of that person? I asked him, really? You got the balls to ask him? I mean, you know, it's like you go the last mile, and some people are just, they they go the last mile. They do that because they are more
Wow.
interesting.
Wow.
You travel more, you learn more about the world, you talk to people, you get in. You want to be in general like a better designer. I wouldn't say even a better entrepreneur. Like whatever you want to do, be more interesting. Go places, get uncomfortable, and then you pour some of that in your work. Okay, and I bet it's gonna be way better.
I absolutely love that answer because it is a question that I think a lot of young people have, especially when they see the industry and how rapidly it's changing. Some of them are fearful because they look at the tooling, they look at the skills that they would have normally learned in school, and now you have a machine that will do that. And you're saying that essentially this frees them up to go and explore, to go and have new experiences
It's
because the tooling will be easy.
It is be human. That's the thing that is not the machine. Like you go to school and the only thing that you do is to learn A, B, C, D. That's gonna be, it's good that you learn the basics. And I'm not saying that people should not go to school or anything, but be human. Over-index that part of you. You know.
Yeah. All right. So let's switch gears. Let's talk back about Freepik as an organization. Let's talk about the broader industry. Tell me about the competitive landscape and how you think about competing with tools like Canva, like Adobe Firefly. Where does Freepik fit into the creative stack? Who are you targeting and why should they be coming to Freepik?
Okay, first of all, I usually don't think in terms of what are the competitors and where we are in terms of competition and all of that. I try to think of it like who are our users, what do they need, and how can we serve them better. Okay, so our users, our core users before Gen AI, it was graphic designers and marketeers, usually
Mhm.
working as freelancers or on small teams. Okay, with Gen AI, we started hitting a new kind of a new profile. Okay, we started getting people that are working in the film industry, photographers because of our magnific upscaler, like different kind of professionals that were not before users of Freepik. And
Yeah.
we are now getting into bigger and bigger teams. Okay. So the positioning, I already mentioned it, is like the creative tasks that are difficult to iterate, where you want to have control over the machine. That's what we do. Okay, is we help people create great designs, and people. Okay, we don't help the machine create great design. We help people create great designs. So the tools that we offer, uh, they don't start the conversation. They are tools and they act as tools. Okay, they have to be controllable, and it's you, the
Mhm.
one that is, sending the orders and telling us what to do. And that's our positioning. That's where we are.
Now, in terms of your tools, you mentioned Magnific. That has blown me away. If you're listening to this podcast and you haven't had a chance to try FreePix Magnific, it's an upscaling tool. You can take something that is really low res and it will blow your mind as to how you can increase the resolution on files. You can then use it in high quality production. That was a strategic acquisition for you guys. How are you thinking about the evolution of the landscape? Are you always keeping your eyes out for tools that the users are just loving? How did that acquisition come about?
Well, that acquisition was spot on for multiple reasons. Like one of them is, um, to me, Magnific does the number one use case of Photoshop is why did people open Photoshop? Because they had a photo and they wanted to improve it, right? So Magnific, it's like it's ridiculous, like how good it is taking one image and
Yeah,
for just making it better. You can think of higher resolution, but I will argue that even the resolution doesn't matter that much. The important thing is that it makes it better. It has an opinion, on the
yeah,
change. It
yeah.
doesn't. All the other upscalers, they had this feature where they really tried very hard to keep to don't break the following invariant, which is if you take up the upscale version. and you downscale it, you get back to the original. Magnific
Mhm.
said, screw that. We don't want to do that. That's boring. Okay. We're going to take your image. That's going to be a strong inspiration. Okay. Very strong inspiration. But we are going to feel free to make changes. Why? The thing that they understood better than anyone is that we are working now with more and more images that we created without having full control over the creation. So now you have plenty of images
Mhm.
that you got them because they look good. Okay. But it's not a photo. It's not something that you want to keep completely faithful. Okay. Or you don't care about it is completely faithful because you generated it with a Gen AI model, or maybe it's a photo, but you don't
Yeah.
care so much about the details. Okay. And by giving it to Magnific, they take this freedom. Okay, I'm gonna add details here. Oh, wait for that. I'm gonna make it awesome, And it really works its magic. And that's something that before
Yeah.
that it was very painful to do on Photoshop. And it's part of those tools that I call the last mile edition. Is you generate an image, but then how do you get control over the top quality of the image? How do you make it really production ready? You need this last mile of edition. That is, I need to retouch, I need to expand, I need to upscale, I need to fix some glitches. And that's our focus. That's where we
Oh,
specialize.
oh, I love that. So, Joaquin, let's switch gears to something a bit more strategic because I think a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of other CEOs will look at how you have evolved the company in the face of AI that was transforming your industry. Talk to me about how AI shows up behind the scenes at Freepik. Outside of the product and the models they're using, are you using AI to increase workflows in your coding? How is Freepik itself changing in the age of AI?
Well, we are using it everywhere, absolutely everywhere. Of course, for the coding, we leave a little bit of freedom to the developer, but they must absolutely become familiar with all the new AI development tools. So I don't care so much if they're using Cursor or Windsurf, or even if they're using a more agentic, 8 layer of Cloud Code or whatever. I don't care. We are not prescribing which tool, but if you are not using any tool, you are not going to keep up the speed. I mean, at the end, I care about the outcome, okay? But the outcome is just phenomenally better with AI tools. Then we are using it in marketing. We are using it even, something funny like you get some more classical workflows at our company. Like at the executive level, sometimes we look at an acquisition, so you have like a lot of paperwork that you need to do, or you look at legal reviews. Like for example, we are putting forward an enterprise subscription. That's something that we are going to announce at the upscale. And one of the open question is, you mentioned it, is it legal to use those models? And we did like a legal analysis on country by country. So we use Europe, US, UK, and then some other more. That was done with external buffet of lawyers. And you know what? Like I asked the same question to ChatGPT with deep research, and the answer was pretty spot on. It was pretty spot on. And it's not only like 30, 40, $50,000 cheaper. It's not that. Well, it's part of it is that, but also important is that I can ask any follow-up questions that I want. If I like the result, but how about Japan? It does just answers Japan. How about anything? But you mentioned here this case. Can you elaborate a little bit more? And it elaborates. Like it's like the latency to get an answer is of course orders of magnitude. In one case is weeks, and the other case is seconds. So that allows you to ask
Mm,
questions, to become curious. And I see that I think that very soon functions are going to change in the company. Like for example, traditional companies, you had the FP&A department on finance, okay, and you have the data department.
mhm,
And the difference is that FP&A, they are well acquainted with finance. So they know what is the revenue, what is the difference with cash flow, what is the EBITDA, but they are usually not as good with data mangling, with data processing. And the data team, they're usually very good at data processing, but they are not very good at, at knowing finance. The thing is that
Yeah.
now everybody can know about each other. Like you get the data team can, you can ask them for a uh, finance report with using the finance lingo, and they can very quickly, ask the embarrassing question. What do you mean by EBITDA? That will be a very newbie, a pretty embarrassing question to ask.
Yeah,
But you
yeah.
can ask it to ChatGPT, get a very clear definition, and then you can keep working with that. I think this is gonna change how you're going to have more individuals that get more and more empowered with more responsibilities because it is really expanding what a single individual can do.
Are there any use cases that you didn't expect within the organization where AI showed up and you're like, wow, that has changed the game for us?
I mean, I'm, I mean, I've been blown away multiple times and trying to think, oh no, at the very beginning, it was very surprising. I guess that by now it's like all news for everybody. Okay. But I remember getting You- one that I did that was interesting is when the first Gemini came out. The new thing that Gemini had is a very long context window. So what I did is
Yeah.
I took my cell phone, I went into Freepik, I was recording my screen, and I started, going around the website. Then I took the video and I uploaded it to Gemini, and I told Gemini, okay, you are an UX researcher. Tell me what are the main pain points of this app. What are the things that you find are weird? Go ahead, be critic. And then it look at the video and say, okay, the logging here is a little bit weird, and da 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 da. And it came with a list of like, man, this is going crazy. There are many, 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 many.
You mentioned like with your developers that you want them adopting different AI tools. How do you upskill the team? How do you encourage that culture of experimentation? How do you ensure that everyone is leveling up? The models are changing, the tools are changing. It's a lot to take in. How do you guys think about that?
It's a great question because what usually happens is that you can do everything, but most people, sadly, they don't have the imagination to understand what that means. Okay, and sometimes you are surprised by I didn't thought that it was able to do that. So something very recent that we are doing is we are asking the teams to make a list of the best queries that they did to ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever,
Mhm.
and make them public so that others can see examples. Okay, especially on your peers, like you look at,
Interesting.
okay, what are the people on my team doing? Wow, I mean, I didn't knew, and we learn from each other because the thing is that the Gemini, ChatGPT, the UI is very generic and it's phenomenally flexible. Okay, it's just a chat interface. But the downside is that it lacks intentionality. It's a blank canvas. You come there and you are the one that has to come up with the idea of that you can ask a question or supply a graphic or anything. Okay. So if you don't get examples of things to ask, for many people, they are going to ask poor questions, or they are going to use it like on a very trivial way. Okay. So I think that's critical, like to show examples from others. And I don't know. I mean, it's a work in progress. We are still not 100% there. I
Yeah.
would love it, but we are moving in that direction.
And what about you personally? How do you stay on the forefront? Because as a leader, you exude this confidence of one embracing the technologies yourself. How are you staying on top of AI?
I think it has changed a little bit. Like when we started after DALI 2, what I did is I started following on Twitter everybody that was posting papers, articles, or new technologies. Like I follow, I don't know, it was like 100 people that were talking about this. Um, I started forwarding to the team like all the papers that came across that were interesting, and I was reading them. Like it's not that I can act anymore on that. I'm not that close to engineering anymore, sadly. But I tried to understand roughly what were the main ideas, behind each paper and how architecture were evolving. And now it's not that anymore. And now, like the AI thing has grown big enough that I can barely keep up with what we are doing on the team. Now it's more like being acquainted with the latest tools that come to the market. Again, like everything is coming out on Twitter, so I'm following on Twitter. I try to experiment a little bit, so I'm using Lovable. I'm using like I made a few apps for my kids, for my family. It's like personal use cases.
Mhm.
I try to see where are the pains, like what are the things that still, don't work. So that when I talk to my engineers, I, I try to understand their pain, and don't come across as, come
Uh,
on, you can ask that to the ChatGPT. It's trivial. You kind of get a feeling of when it gets stuck, when it doesn't work. But also to push them to learn from each other, because very often is how are you talking to it? There is this other way of asking the question that actually works, and you need to develop that feeling. Okay, so I don't know. I mean, it's evolving. I try to keep up with everything that's coming out on Twitter. I try as many products as I can. Of course, it's a team effort. Again, just part of it.
Love it. Joaquin, we're out of time, sadly, but I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. Next week is Upscale Conf. I can't wait to see the announcements that come out. But thank you for this. Thank you for sitting down with us at Maginative. Thank you for sharing with the creative community. Is there any closing remark that you'd want to give to a creative that's out there listening, a martech leader that's tuning in? What would you give them as advice from somebody on the frontier of AI development right now?
I will repeat that thing about over-index your humanity. Like think about you, think about being interesting, think about uh, being somebody that brings something to the table, because the mechanical skills, they may be obsolete, but who you are is absolutely unique. Okay. And I think that's gonna stay. So like remove the fear, be optimistic, and live your life. I don't know what else to say. Try to be interesting.
I love that. Again, thank you for sitting down with me. I appreciate it. Until next time, I hope to have this conversation in person. And good luck with your football ambitions with Malaga and with Real Madrid.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris.
Right, until next time, take care.
Bye.